Welcome to Cup Chat with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. Today, join our Birding with Extension team members and guests Katy, Hoskins, and Dani Miller as they give you a guide to Birding the Border 2024. Hope you enjoy.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I am Dani Miller, and I'm going to be your singular host today because Emily and Rainey are busy with stock show stuff, and Liz had the misfortune to get called for grand jury duty, which I didn't know until she told me about it, is even more of a time commitment than regular jury duty. Let's see. Since I am a one-woman band today, I will not be able to monitor the comments, but please do share where you're tuning in from, your county, state, so we know that you're here. And today I have with me Katy Hoskins, who is going to be our photography guide for Birding the Border this year for our photography track. So we're thrilled to have her as a guide. She's also going to be our keynote speaker. So we're going to dig into that a little bit as well. But to start off, Katy, do you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am a rancher, basically, but I've spent some time teaching school and other things like that. We ranch south of Sweetwater. I was born in the Trans-Pecos and spent the first 30-something years of my life there, and I really miss that area. But I like living here too. Just like to go see birds.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you get into birding? What was kind of your start there?
My start was really when I took the Quail Masters program, which AgriLife, I'm kind of an AgriLife extension junkie. I've taken lots of the programs, but in 2017,
I love that.
I did the Quail Masters with Dr. Rollins and Amanda, and just had a great time. But within that, you're exposed to so many other birds and so many ways that quail depend upon other birds, and the whole interaction and how quail kind of, the decline of the quail is more or less the decline of all the grassland birds in North America. So you just get real interested in those things and just keep moving on.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have kind of a similar story. Just I helped a PhD student work on some bobwhite quail research out in the Rolling Plains when I was an undergrad, and that was also my first exposure to those grassland birds and understanding how quail are, that kind of an indicator species or an umbrella species potentially for those other species. So I have to ask then, do you have a spark bird, and is it the quail or is it something else?
It is the quail.
Okay.
Yeah, the bobwhite or the blues. There's 5 quail in North America. I've seen all but one of them, and I'd love to see that one someday, but that's kind of my spark bird.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I still sometimes hear the bobwhite call in my dreams from having to listen to their calls so specifically for that research. And one time I was just east of Taylor working on a farm, and I heard it and I thought I imagined it. Like first thing in the morning, I was like, there's no way. And I walk outside and he's sitting in the elm tree next to the house. I'm like, what are you doing in East Williamson County?
I heard some last year near Decatur, which kind of shocked me too. It's like, wow, that's really cool.
That is cool. Yeah, no, it's wild how they're struggling a bit on that, that western edge of their range, but it's really cool just to see them anywhere. I love it too. So you mentioned the one quail you haven't seen, but do you have a birding bucket list item that you've done and would recommend to other people? And then do you have something that you haven't done that's still on your list?
Well, I think especially anybody in the Southwest, you really need to see the Texas coast and the whooping cranes. I'm going to meet some friends down there next week, but I've done that several times, and there's, it's always fun to see the coastal birds. And then if you're in this part of the world, a trip to Bosque del Apache in the middle part, I think it's south of Socorro, New Mexico. They have a great Sandhill Crane Festival, but you can go pretty much any time of the year and see some great birds. So as far as what I would like to do, I really want to I want to see that last quail. I want to see a mountain quail. I love traveling to South America. I love the South American birds. I want to do some more of that, maybe the Pantanal Wilderness. I'd
Oh,
like to go to Kauai and see some of the albatross that come in for half the year. So I've got a lot of things on my bucket
yeah.
list.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I was looking at your website, artontherange.net. Can you share a little bit about I mean, you've been to some really cool places. I mean, the Galapagos is definitely on one of my is on my bucket list. But in Antarctica, so if you want to share anything about like your photography with those wild places, would love to hear
The
about that.
Galapagos trip was fantastic. I'd go again in a heartbeat. It just takes some time commitment. And the Antarctic trip was actually about 12 years ago. It was on my 25th wedding anniversary, and I wasn't really into photography at that time. But I'd always wanted to go to Antarctica, and my husband gave me the trip for our 25th wedding anniversary as long as he didn't have to go because he doesn't like cold. So,
Love that.
so that's kind of how that came about. Some of my best birding trips, I have won at raffles at like the Texas chapter of the Wildlife Society. I was able to go to Chester Island with Tim and Peggy Wilkerson last May to see all of those breeding pairs with their bird count. I've done lesser prairie chickens up in the Panhandle with one of those raffle items, and sitting in a blind an hour before the sun comes up, just listening to those prairie chickens is pretty amazing. So
Yeah,
just you don't have to travel far to have some great birding experiences. There's a
yeah,
lot right here.
absolutely. So you mentioned, when you went to Antarctica, you weren't quite into photography then. So tell me a little bit about, how that started and how that became, a passion for you as well.
Well, when our daughter left for college, she and I had spent a lot of time together doing like horse related things on weekends and stuff. And when she left, I just didn't feel the need to keep doing that on my own. And so I needed a hobby. And I was scrolling through Facebook and I saw Wyman Menzer had a photography clinic. So I thought, well, let's try that. And I had met Wyman several years ago when he was working on a book. And so I did one of his photography clinics and just kind of got hooked and then started doing all kinds of workshops and things like that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It's so cool when you try something new and sometimes it doesn't work out and you're like, that's not for me, but it really is pretty amazing when something does speak to you as a pastime and a passion, and then you just be able to dive right in. So birds, probably one of your favorite subjects to photograph, but do you have kind of like generally speaking, what do you love to photograph, and what do you do to kind of follow that passion?
Generally, it's more any kind of wildlife. I love wildlife. I love being outside. Birds kind of comes around naturally because sometimes you can't find a bear, sometimes you can't find a lion, but you can almost always find a bird. You can almost always find a bird. And you can tie all of this in. Conservation is very, very important to me, both habitat conservation and wildlife conservation. And you can use photography to tell those stories and to get other people as interested in conservation as you are, because I think we all need to be interested. It's no longer just a luxury. We've got to have conservation in our game plan going forward. So that's it's kind of where that is.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you when you do go out on these photography trips and you're kind of assessing your subject matter, and like, what are the things that you think about when you want to convey that storytelling aspect for conservation? Is there anything in particular that when you're out in the field that you're kind of analyzing as this would be great as part of this conservation message?
Well, I'm always looking for behaviors, and I'm always mindful of what the animal or the bird is doing. I never really want to change an animal's behavior. I never want it to have to use energy to get away from me. So I either keep my distance or use a long lens or use a blind or something like that. But people are fascinated with animal behavior and fascinated knowing how social they are, how they communicate with each other, just things of that nature.
Yeah, I will say I hadn't seen a painted redstart before last summer, and I got to see it in Big Bend, and I just had no idea that flitting behavior they have. Like he was going at, doing that repeatedly, constantly as we were seeing him in the tree. And I just thought it was a more memorable moment for me and something that'll stick with me because I was observing really interesting behavior on top of just seeing a beautiful bird.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
yeah, this cold spell, I've been watching the hundreds of pine siskins at the feeder. And
yeah.
they're so funny to watch.
Yeah. And you mentioned like sitting in a blind. That's another really cool way that I recently learned as well, that you can bird just sitting there as as the sun rises and everything kind of comes to life around you. And I think I spent 15 minutes just watching a couple of mourning doves like very slowly make their way across in front of the blind on the ground. And then a couple of ravens were just really unhappy with each other, but it was so fun to watch.
It is. It's super fun.
Observer. So let's probably dive in a little bit to birding the border now and kind of what the photography track is going to look like. We've got three really awesome sites that we've had before, so we know really well what's potentially there and like where to see them. And you were on that photography track as a participant last year. So we've got McKenna Ranch, Kickapoo Cavern State Park, and Transition Ranch. So let's start with McKenna Ranch. Can you describe a little bit kind of what that experience was for you last year and or what you're looking forward to this year at McKenna?
McKenna Ranch was just, classic Southwest Texas. It kind of, if you haven't been there, it kind of reminds you of maybe Seminole Canyon State Park, that kind of terrain. The hosts there were lovely. We had beautiful facilities. We got to go in and have lunch with them and visit, but we saw some great birds. I think that's where we saw the gray vireo last year.
Very possible.
So we did it was about a 2-mile hike, I think. So it was quite a bit of hiking. They had one bird blind, which we did later on, but it was a very, very fun experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they maintain their paths really well. So it's a nice, laid back walk, but you're also getting to see some really cool stuff as you move along. Yeah, I love McKenna Ranch. Been there a few times now, and yes, they are lovely people. It was really cool. One time we were there at night. We were staying overnight, and we got to see a western screech owl and an eastern screech owl.
Oh my goodness! Oh,
I don't know if they landed on the exact same tree, but they were like in trees adjacent, which was really cool. And then so Kickapoo Cavern State Park, we've got a little bit of a different habitat and a little bit of a different excursion type. So what does that look like for folks?
It was different. They had a couple more blinds. The trails are very well maintained. I really enjoyed the colors at Kickapoo Caverns. And last year it was a big year for algerita berries. So you had these big bushes of red berries with these very green trees. And so the birds just really popped on some of those bushes. And of course, we saw that's the golden cheek warbler there, and just a ton of birds, several different vireos. But it was a lovely place. And then I went back for the bat and owl dinner that night. And I think the bat flight was one of my favorite parts. It was just amazing. So
yeah, I've been there for the bats as well, but I went there in June with Rio Diablo Birding Camp, and it was so hot by then that the bats were like, nah, we're not going out before the sun goes down. Like, that's not happening.
We're good. Well, I hope in May it will be as good as last year, because the bats came out and then you saw the hawks come in.
Oh yeah. No, I got to see that out
really
further
neat.
west out of Concan, the Annandale Ranch, and I'd never seen a bat flight and like that. I'd seen the one in Austin around Congress, but never where you had those hawks coming in and just plucking them out of the air. It was one of those like nature is metal moments where you have to appreciate, you can feel bad for the bat, but also appreciate that it's just like one of those parts of life that is also, again, really cool to be an observer for.
The only thing would have been better is if there'd been some coach whips on the side of
yeah
Like
that would
in
be
the movie.
the full trifecta, I feel like, of bat predation and yeah, so no, I think it's been pretty consistent for us birds, bats, and owls to have the bat flight. And I think you're going to be there as well for that dinner this year as well. I said. And I think we've got 1 or 2 spots left for that dinner for anybody who's hasn't registered yet, who's watching. We've got it. That's a really cool dinner where, like Katy was saying, we go out to Kickapoo. We have a really lovely meal, and we get to watch the bat flight, and then also go owling. So that's a really cool opportunity if you haven't done it before. And then Transition Ranch is our 3rd photography track stop. And that also is kind of like a different way of doing bird photography. It's going to be pretty much all blinds, from what I understand. Is that correct?
All blinds, and the blinds are very well maintained, and they're very well situated. They're situated so the light is just perfect. There's lots of different trees and bushes for the birds to land on, and they're very comfortable. And again, the host is a really, really fun person, and I think he sat with us in one blind and would help identify birds. And so that was a fun trip. And if it's the last day, you're kind of tired by the last day, so it's really okay to sit in the blind.
Absolutely, yeah. And Liz was telling me that he kind of situates like the feeders and such so that you get the opportunity to get some really cool photography without having the feeder in the shot, if you don't want it, if you want that more natural viewpoint, so that's pretty neat.
Yeah, the feed is hidden in very natural ways.
Yeah, that's got to be an art form all by itself.
Because you just don't want it looking staged.
Yeah,
I don't want it looking staged.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of wildlife photography, again, it's kind of like sometimes you want to include it because it is part of the storytelling when you're talking about how backyard bird feeders and bird houses are important for conservation. But at the same time, if you're just talking about your regular old look at these cool birds, you don't necessarily want the feeder in there. So well, I guess I didn't really address this as we were going through them, but you brought them up a little bit. So are there any favorite moments from these 3 spots that you haven't mentioned before that you want to share in particular, that are just kind of like these, the photography track is awesome, and those are some of your experiences last year?
I think at one point on the Transition Ranch, we saw 2 male painted buntings get into an argument, and that's pretty intense.
Yeah.
2 such beautiful little creatures, they fight so hard. So that was interesting.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And then there was something, it was just a mockingbird, so not really an exciting species, but he was going into attack mode. And when they go into attack mode, it's very interesting. And we got some really good action shots of the mockingbird.
Oh yeah, that is really cool. Yeah, no, I have a particular skill for seeing a mockingbird in the field. When I was down at Rio Grande, I did one of the birding trips for that festival, and I managed to spot all the mockingbirds. Yeah, if you need to find a mockingbird, I was
all the mockingbirds.
Yeah. Oh, and grackles. No, I was also excellent.
And grackles, okay.
Yeah, grackles further afield. I just see a flight, a flock of birds out there, and I was like, "What are those?" And they were like, "You got the grackles. You really have a talent."
And sometimes you think you've seen something like a scrub jay, and it's a mockingbird. Mockingbirds can look so different.
Yeah. No, but that was a fun day too. So regarding photography, you went through it kind of in like that a little bit more of a formal way with the clinic to start with. Would you recommend that, or any other tips for people who are interested in getting into photography? What are some suggestions that you have for that?
Well, what's kind of I guess one of the good things to come out of the pandemic is people learning how to do webinars and Zooms and things like that. And there are some great photography webinars out there, and even podcasts. But like I've traveled a lot with Wildside Nature Tours, and they have a website, wildsidenaturettours.com, and they have a ton of free webinars on photography, wildlife photography on there. It's really a great resource. I'm also a member of the North American Nature Photography Association, and there's a lot of stuff on their website. I'd also say there's no end to the amount of money you can spend in photography, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really great used equipment out there. You can rent equipment at almost any, I know in Lubbock and Abilene and Austin, there's lots of places you can rent good equipment. So I would always say, don't start out with real high ticket items. Find some you can rent for a week and see if you like it, or find something used. There's just a lot of resources out there that weren't even out there 10 years ago. But there are also some great guides, especially in Texas, especially in the Rio Grande Valley. If you want to take a weekend trip with one of those guides, it's well worth it. To make a living as a photographer, you pretty much have to do a lot of guiding and things like that too. So look for those guides if you're interested.
Yeah, I've heard kind of from our our one of our core team members, Brian. He's also a photographer as well, and I think he had to be kind of a co-photographer and guide, and luckily he loves both of those things, all of that. But I can imagine trying to be a wildlife photographer, and that be kind of your whole career path, is definitely a challenge, to find that niche in the industry. But as a hobby, it's a little bit easier for folks to get into if you're not quite ready to jump into that as a job. But yeah. Well, the other thing that I mentioned earlier in our chat was you will be our keynote speaker for our Birding with Extension dinner Saturday night at Birding the Border. So do you have a little soundbite you could share about your address?
Well, when Emily first contacted me, she was very interested in the whole ranching aspect and how ranchers and wildlife managers protect habitat while still raising food. And so basically I'm going to go into what we do as a ranch and why ranching is so important for grassland bird conservation. I mean, and the bottom line is most ranchers in Texas are on native rangelands, and they're managing large tracts of native rangelands, which is basically just conserving bird habitat. It's not being developed. It's not being put into a monoculture or a crop. I think people would be surprised at the number of ranchers that know all their birds and have bird lists for their ranch and really do care about the birds and try to make mindful decisions about what am I doing to make a living raising food, but at the same time protect the wild animals that are on my property.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm very excited. I know Emily is incredibly excited. She was talking about it a little bit at last Cup Chat. But I'm also very excited to hear kind of your experience firsthand and your perspective on that, because I come from a research background, not a landowner background. And so I have some of that scientific knowledge acquired, but I don't have, that history, that legacy of managing the land. And I think I'm very excited to hear your story and your perspective on that. And so to wrap up, since it's getting close to 8:00, we do have our question of the year. So what is your favorite place to bird?
That is such a hard question. I thought about it. There's so many, but I guess I'm going to have to say, even though there's no quail there, the Texas coast. I love, or the Gulf Coast. There's just so many birds, and you can look out and you see a brown pelican, and you see brown pelicans everywhere. And you think that 50 years ago they were endangered. They were at risk of not surviving. So that's neat. I like the
particular spot along the coast that's kind of your go-to, want to get there as often as you can spot?
Probably Rockport and Aransas National Wildlife Refuge. those are kind of our go-to places. Like I said, I'm meeting some friends there next week. And I've picked up some really great ideas from Cup Chat. I was so excited when AgriLife Extension got involved in birding because I thought this is a perfect match. And I've, this year you had Brent Ortega on last month about the Christmas bird count, and I've always been a little bit intimidated to join that. But after watching that Cup Chat, I called Dr. Skipper at Angelo State and joined that bird count, and it was a lot of fun. So I really appreciate the work that AgriLife Extension is doing.
Well, I will absolutely share those compliments. I can't take credit for the vast majority of it, but I will share that with our core team, who are AgriLife staff, and they do so much. And I get to see a little bit of it behind the scenes when I help out, but the amount that they get done, and the really cool things that the ideas they have and the things that they actually execute still amaze me. Just love it.
Oh, me too. And the Rio Diablo camp, I just think that's a fantastic project.
Yeah, I'm always excited to do that. I've already got my time booked out for next June. And I know we've got, for those folks watching, if you have a 14 to 18-year-old who might be interested in a week-long birding camp, we'll be opening up registration for that, I believe, later this month. So stay tuned. We'll definitely share announcements on all of our communications platforms for that. And if, again, if you're interested in joining the photography track at Birding the Border with Katy, we do have one spot left for that track. And then, of course, if you're just generally there to bird and see really cool places without necessarily a honed in sort of photography purpose, you can still generally there to bird and you can still enjoy photography on our other tracks as well. If photography track fills up before you can get there. So yeah, check out our website. And other than that, thank you very much, Katy, for joining us, and we'll log off now.
Okay, thank you for having me.
All right. Let me see if I think Emily's got control of the Facebook Live. So in the meeting. Okay. It looks like we just need to end the meeting, and we'll go off from there. So I will see you at Birding the Border, Katy, and I look forward to it.
Thank you, Dani. I appreciate it.
Bye.